Hey guys, it's Danny Arajo and it's October, bitches. This month is gonna be jam-packed with spooky themed Halloween stuff, different sketches that are probably Halloween themed. I am literally so excited. I've been planning this for so long. This is gonna be great. Since my super obnoxious backdrop and lights, I had to rummage all around Hobby Lobby to find them. Trust me, this was the best one. I had to go through like 800 pedophile looking Santas just to find this. Like the rest of them were like prints that your second grade teacher would like sew into a skirt because Deborah wanted to be festive. Anyway, I'm starting this month off with one of my stories that is definitely creepier and a little darker than my other ones, but it's an interesting story and I think you guys will enjoy it. I really debated whether or not I should tell it because there's a lot of issues involved and different things like that, but I figured, you know what, this is my story. This had a large impact on my life for a long time and I feel like my turn to tell it, you know? I debated calling this a stalker story and I eventually decided to go against it because in the end, it's really not necessarily stalker behavior. The guy who was pursuing me genuinely wasn't a stalker. He was like a troubled high schooler. I don't really think he knew how to conduct himself with girls or what was considered acceptable behavior, so I didn't want to sensationalize it and call it a stalker story if that's not what it was. But still, it's fucking creepy. Let's go. So this was way back in 2010. I was a freshman in high school, I was 14 years old, and I was new to high school, naturally, so I wanted to become more involved. And the best way for me to become involved was with theater. I've always loved theater, I've loved acting, I've loved public speaking, so naturally, joining the theater would be something really advantageous for me. So I tried out for a play the first semester and I got cast as an extra. And if you don't know what an extra is, you're basically the bottom of the food chain when it comes to that particular production. And that's really what they did with most freshmen. They cast them as an extra and then kind of see how their acting prowess or how their work ethic is, and eventually as you go through high school they'd probably move you up to bigger and bigger parts. So I was cast with two other freshmen. They were both guys. One of them I'm going to call Harry, which is short for Harry Potter, and if he watches this video, he will know exactly why I'm calling him that. He basically became my partner in crime throughout high school when it came to theater and acting. We really, were simpatico, we worked off of each other. The other guy, not so much. So this other guy I'm gonna call Damien. I'm not gonna use his real name. He was bigger, kind of awkward, like a little off-putting. He always carried around like this really big notebook. But he wasn't like inherently like weird or anything, but that is until you talk to him. So because we were all extras, we were more or less obligated to all hang out with each other. So I remember our very first conversation, or at least one of them, that very first rehearsal, he talked about Damien. He talked about how this one time he was like in a psych ward and doctors had hooked this machine up to his brain and somehow the pillow next to him started on fire and doctors couldn't figure out why it started on fire and it was some mystery about his brain. Like, sure dude, I'm totally positive that you actually started a fire with your brain, and that's a totally well-adjusted thing to tell a person that you just met. So initially I just thought that he was kind of odd, but I didn't think that that was necessarily problematic because I too am kind of odd. So I didn't really think that he was threatening or anything, but motherfucker proved me wrong. As rehearsal really started over the next couple weeks, I noticed that he always stood really close to me. Like unnaturally close, like way within my personal bubble. He would never stand like beside me or like in front of me or anything. He was always standing behind me. That is the creepiest thing to me because I'm very short. I'm 5'2", maybe 5'3" on a good day. He's got a good like 6 to 8 inches on me and he would just stand behind me and just loom there as I would just stand there, and it began to make me very, very uncomfortable. So it began to get really unsettling, but I decided just to deal with it. So the weeks continue to go on. We see each other every day after school for a few hours for rehearsal. And keep in mind that we're extras. So what that means is we're basically part of the backdrop. We help set the scene. We really don't have speaking lines, or if we do, they're very minimal. We're not really big actors at all. So as the weeks progress, a friend of mine comes up to me and she asks, "Hey, how was it kissing Damien?" What are you talking about? I've never kissed Damien. And she goes, "No, like in the play, like you kissed him in the play." And still, I'm just, no, I've never kissed him in the play. We're extras, we don't even talk. We have so little stage business, why would we be kissing? She looks at me, I kid you not, she looks at me and she goes, "Well, Damien's telling everybody that you guys have a kissing scene in the play and you like hardcore make out on stage." what the actual fuck? Like, not only is it super creepy that some guy would run around telling lies that you guys are supposed to be kissing or whatever, but anyone who goes to see the play will obviously see that that's not true, so why would you even lie about it? At this point, I really started to get creeped out. So this is where the story starts to turn. It's less, oh haha, he's weird, and starts to become more genuinely disturbing. So it's getting on with the show. We're probably about a month in, we're getting closer to the end. There's one scene that we have where I have to run on stage, he has to grab me, I have to swat him off with my purse, run away, and he chases after me. So naturally, because this is actually a pretty violent thing to do, we had to practice a lot to make sure that we didn't actually hurt each other. And as time goes on, I start to notice that he's really gripping my arms very, very tight, to the point where it starts to hurt. So I remember one time, it was a little bit more towards the end of the show, so probably about mid-October, we were doing a scene, I run on stage and he runs after me naturally, but when he goes to, grab me, he actually grips me, he grabs me and he jerks me around, so I turn to face him and he grips my arms and he squeezes so tight that I start to get scared and he just fucking stares at me. He just fucking looks in my face while he's just grabbing me. So because I can hardly move at all, I really start to panic, but I eventually managed to wrest my arm away from him and I smacked him so hard with my purse that it made this huge booming slap noise, and he actually staggered back. I fucking hit him. And as he was staggering back, I bolted off the stage. I ran so fast through that set as he was chasing me that I actually ended up scraping my arm on one of the beams of the set, ripped my skin open, started bleeding everywhere. I did not give a fuck. Because at that point, he wasn't acting. This wasn't method acting. He never brought this up to me. He honestly just held me there really tightly until I got scared. So I reach backstage, naturally he follows after me, and I'm trying to stop my arm from bleeding because I really scraped myself. And I turn to him, and he's just laughing. And I don't say anything, I'm just kind of looking at him holding my arm. He's laughing and he says, "You should have seen how scared you looked." At this point, I was really getting tired of it. I told him, you know what, you know how that scene is supposed to go, don't ever do that again. And he was kind of like a dog with his tail between his legs, he was really repentant. But in retrospect, this is kind of where everything really kicked off. It's almost like me telling him no, he got a rise out of me telling him not to do something. That's when he really started to be more creepy. It's as if, stepping over those lines and boundaries was giving him a thrill, especially when I was telling him to stop. That's literally so creepy, but hang in there because it gets much worse. So after this whole grabbing incident, he really decided to step his game up. So one day I'm sitting down in the auditorium next to my friend Harry, and Damien sits right behind me. So I'm sitting down doing homework, kind of passively watching the actors, and I feel what's a small pinch on my scalp. So I just kind of brushed it off like it was a spider or a bug or something. I'm continuing to just do my own thing. And then it happens again, but it's really sharp this time. It's a little tug at my hair. I shoot my hand up, what the hell? I thought it was a giant bug or something on me. And as I shoot my hand up, Damien from behind me gets up and runs away. So I turn over to Harry, what the fuck? What did he just do? Because at that point I kind of figured okay, he just did something to me. I turn to Harry, I'm okay, well, what did he just do? And I shit you not, I'm not even joking. Harry looks at me dead ass in the face and he goes, "He stole your hair." I say, "What?" And he goes, "Yeah, he's telling everybody that he's gonna try to put a love spell on you, so he stole one of your hairs to do it." Looking back at it now, my biggest question is what did he do with it? Did he chant something and flush it down the toilet? Or did he tie it to a voodoo doll of me and then set it on fire? Did he fucking put it in his Easy Mac and eat it? What the fuck did he do with my hair? At the time, really all I could do was just sit there in shock. Not only was I petrified, but I was fucking livid. Because not only did he steal something from me, he literally stole one of my body parts. He stole my hair right out of my head. He eventually comes back and he sits down like nothing happened, and I turned around in my chair and I dead ass looked him in the face because I was not having it, and I told him, "Give me back my hair." And he just stared back at me like a deer in the headlights for a minute, and we just stared at each other. And the motherfucker starts laughing. He thinks it's funny. He is cracking up at the fact that I'm telling him not to touch me or put his little love spell on me, and the entire time I'm just railing into him, "What's your problem? Why would you do that? Don't touch me," that kind of thing. And he's just laughing. He thought it was funny. So now I really start avoiding him like no other. I figured if I just left him alone, if I avoided him at all costs like the plague, then eventually he'd leave me alone. But I was seriously wrong. So here's where it really started to get scary for me. It wasn't just a weird guy with a weird crush anymore. It really started to get very severe and grave and serious. One night I stayed late to work on the set. It was called tech, and I stayed late to do tech, and my older sister was part of the tech crew, so she stayed late as well. So I got to work with my sister. It was a lot of fun. It was pretty late that night. It was probably about 7 or 8, and most of the people had left, Damien included. But Damien forgot something very important. Remember that notebook he always carried around? He had left it on a stool backstage. And my older sister, being my older sister, grabs it and says, "Let's crack this bitch open." At that moment, it became very apparent why that notebook never left his hands. So we sat backstage and we thumbed through it, and a lot of the things that we found were just haunting. Some of it really wasn't so bad. I remember there being a sketch of like 2 people kissing, and while it was like kind of crudely drawn, it wasn't like problematic or anything. You know, there was also some love poetry that wasn't too bad either. So given that some of it was love poetry, there would be poems about like seeing a girl, loving her, yearning for her, but she never really notices, and it's kind of like, you know, mundane high school poetry, all written in first person, by the way. That's very important. This was all written from his perspective. Then it got really dark. It was like the flip of a switch. Like you flip the page and all of a sudden any of the doodles were just these angry scribbled or smudged drawings of just weird abstract images and shit. They were just so off and obviously angry. Suddenly there were these poems that were just furiously scrawled out that started out about like loving a woman, but then kind of devolved into developing a hatred for her. It was this dark, malevolent anger aimed towards this woman that he was writing about, and it's still all within a really sexual frame. And then suddenly it develops into some really graphic sexual violence. He started writing about raping her. And as if that wasn't scary enough, after that it goes into him brutally murdering her, and then it goes even farther to say that he ate her. The poem literally ended with him cannibalizing the woman that he brutally raped and murdered, and then ate. And this was all within the first person. That was officially one of the scariest moments of my life, because at that moment I knew that inside he just wasn't well. His perception of women and romance and everything was warped with like this gruesome, bloody sexual violence, and to know that I was an object of his affection was just like, I can't even describe it. I also regret to say that it gets much worse. So the show was almost done. It was late October, and for whatever reason, I remember that the majority of rehearsal was taking place in a band room, but I'd forgotten something in the auditorium, so I went back and I was cutting through the stage to get there, and I was standing on like in the wings backstage, and I was right next to the curtain. I remember that. I was standing right next to the curtain. Someone comes up behind me, but I don't really turn around or acknowledge it. I just keep doing what I'm doing and don't really think anything of it. Like, you already know who it is. I'm not gonna try to keep you in suspense. You know who it was. But he comes up and he stands right behind me. Keep in mind, there's no one in this entire auditorium. So he comes up, he stands right behind me, he leans down, and he whispers, "I'm going to rape you." And that feeling of just terror and panic, like, I hate to say that there aren't any words for it, but there physically aren't any words for it. So when I finally managed to quell that enough to move, I whipped around and I'm just staring. And of course it's Damien, and he's standing there and he's laughing. He thought it was funny. He thought that my reaction to him telling me that he was gonna rape me was funny. I told him that's not okay, all this different shit, and the entire time he was just laughing. The show ended almost immediately after that. I think we had 1 or 2 more rehearsals, and of course the entire time I really avoided him. I was physically so afraid of him, I didn't even do the next show the next semester. I loved theater, it was what I loved to do, but I heard that he was going to be involved in it. I still don't know if he was, I just heard that he was going to be, so I didn't even try out. I unfortunately didn't tell anybody what he said. I should have, but I was so afraid and also really, really embarrassed. But luckily for me, he ended up happening to have to leave school after that, and I never had to deal with him again. So I know the ending is somewhat disappointing, but the moral of this story is if something like that happens to you, you really need to tell somebody. Because even now, I'm still kind of dealing with a lot of this. It's 7 years later and I'm still not completely at ease anymore. So there you guys go. We're gonna kick off October with a super creepy story, and that was my super creepy, not so secret admirer story. I hope you liked it, or at least I hope you learned something. I would really appreciate if you guys liked and subscribed, but if you don't want to, that's fine. I just want you to know that you'll be missing out on excellent Halloween content. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next week. Bye!
Hey, Luke Mason, Kitty. Hey, Kitty.
Because I can like hardly move my